Baby saw a German shepherd pacing on a rooftop. What followed brought tears to every eye. What you're about to listen to will completely change how you see the bond between humans and animals. Before we begin, hit that like button. If you love heartwarming stories, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning sun painted the sky in soft watercolors when 5-year-old Jake's eyes fluttered open. Something felt different about this Tuesday morning. Maybe it was the distant sound of sirens echoing through Cedar Ridge, or maybe it was the restless energy that seemed to buzz in the air. Jake rubbed his sleepy eyes and shuffled to his bedroom window, pressing his small nose against the cool glass. That's when he saw her. A beautiful German shepherd stood on the flat roof of the old workshop next door, her golden and black coat catching the early light. But she wasn't just standing there, she was pacing. Back and forth, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that only she could see. The dog would walk to the edge of the roof, peer down with intense focus, then circle around a small skylight before stopping completely and staring directly at Jake's window. The boy's breath fogged the glass as he watched, mesmerized. There was something about the way the dog moved that made his chest feel tight. She wasn't just wandering around up there. She was trying to tell someone something. But who would listen to a dog on a rooftop at dawn? Jake's bare feet slapped against the hardwood floor as he ran down the hallway to his parents' bedroom. He burst through their door without knocking, something he'd been told not to do 100 times before. "Mom! Dad! Wake up! There's a dog on the roof and she's talking." His mother, Lisa, stirred first. She was a nurse at the local hospital and had trained herself to wake up quickly when called. Her husband, Mike, a carpenter with hands that seemed to fix everything in their small town, groaned and pulled a pillow over his head. "Jake, honey, dogs don't talk," Lisa said gently, sitting up and smoothing her son's messy hair. "Maybe you had a dream." "No, Mom, she's really there. She's walking and looking and she keeps staring at me like she needs help." Mike finally sat up, his construction worker muscles stretching as he yawned. "Probably just a stray that chased a bird up there, buddy. Dogs do weird things sometimes." But Jake wasn't giving up. He grabbed his mother's hand and pulled her toward the window. "Please just look! She's talking with her feet!" Lisa exchanged a glance with her husband. Jake had always been sensitive to animals. Last month, he'd insisted that their neighbor's cat was sad because it kept sitting by the fence. And sure enough, they'd discovered the elderly owner had been hospitalized. Maybe there was something to pay attention to here. The family made their way to Jake's room, and as soon as they reached the window, they all fell silent. The German shepherd was still there, and her behavior was unlike anything they'd ever seen. She wasn't just pacing randomly. There was a pattern. She would walk to the building's edge, place her paws on the low wall that ran around the roof's perimeter, then move to a bent ventilation pipe and paw at it while whining softly. After each sequence, she would return to the same spot near the skylight and look directly at their house. "That's strange," Mike admitted, scratching his stubble. "How long has she been up there?" "I don't know, but look at her eyes, Dad. She's not playing. She's scared." As if responding to Jake's words, the wind picked up suddenly, sending loose shingles clattering across neighboring rooftops. The German shepherd's ears flattened against her head, but instead of seeking shelter, she moved more urgently to the damaged vent pipe. She pawed at it once, twice, then let out a single piercing whine that cut through the morning air like a knife. Then she turned and locked eyes with Jake again, and in that moment, something passed between them, a understanding, a plea. "We have to help her," Jake whispered, his small hand pressed against the window glass. Lisa's nursing instincts kicked in. She was used to reading between the lines, noticing what others missed, understanding when something was seriously wrong, even if she couldn't immediately identify what it was. "Mike, maybe we should call maintenance for the building, if there's a dog stuck up there, and risk someone falling off a roof to get a dog that might jump down and run away the second they get close." Mike shook his head. "I don't know, Lisa. That's dangerous." But Jake was already moving toward the back door, his bare feet carrying him through the kitchen and toward the yard. "She needs me to look. She keeps showing me that pipe thing. Something's wrong." His parents followed quickly, Mike grabbing a jacket and Lisa slipping into her shoes. In the backyard, they could hear the dog more clearly now. She wasn't just whining randomly. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern, almost like she was trying to communicate in code. "You know what?" Mike said slowly, studying the building next to theirs. "I've got that covered ladder platform I use for work projects. We could get high enough to see what's going on without actually climbing onto the roof. Keep everyone safe, but still check things out." Lisa nodded. "If the dog is in distress, we can't just ignore it. And Jake... She looked down at her son, who was staring up at the German Shepherd with complete focus. "Jake seems to understand something we don't. The decision was made not with words, but with movement." Mike disappeared into their garage and emerged pulling a sturdy platform ladder on wheels, the kind professionals use for electrical work and painting. Within minutes, he had it positioned safely against the side of their house, high enough to see over the low wall. Onto the workshop roof, but not high enough to put anyone in real danger. "I'll go up first," Mike said. "You two stay down here until I know what we're dealing with." But as soon as Mike's head appeared above the roofline, the German Shepherd's entire body language changed. She stopped pacing. She stopped whining. Instead, she lay down flat against the roof surface, her intelligent brown eyes fixed on Mike with an intensity that made him pause. "It's okay, girl," he called softly. "We're here to help." The dog's tail thumped once against the roof, but she didn't get up. Instead, she began to crawl, actually crawl, toward the bent ventilation pipe, keeping her belly low to the surface. When she reached it, she placed her nose against the metal opening and then looked back at Mike expectantly. "Lisa, bring Jake up here, slowly. I think this dog is trying to show us something." As the family climbed onto the platform together, the morning air carried something none of them had noticed from the ground. A sound. Faint, but definitely there. Coming from inside the building below them. Tap, tap, tap. The German Shepherd heard it too, because her ears perked up immediately, and she moved to place her paw directly over the source of the sound. She looked at the family and whined once softly as if to say, "Do you hear it now?" Mike felt his stomach tighten. "That's not a bird, and it's not building settling. That's..." He paused, not wanting to alarm his family, but knowing he had to be honest. "That sounds like someone tapping for help." The dog seemed to understand that they'd finally heard what she'd been trying to tell them. She stood up, moved to the skylight, and placed both front paws on the glass. Through the dusty spiderwebbed surface, they could make out the dim interior of the workshop below. And that's when they saw it. A large metal shelving unit had toppled over, pinning what looked like a wooden trapdoor shut. Scattered around the fallen shelves were tools, paint cans, and what appeared to be camping equipment. But what made Jake gasp and grab his mother's arm was something else entirely. In the dim light filtering through the dirty skylight, they could see a small object glinting on the floor near the trapped door. It looked like a metal tag or badge of some kind. And pressed into the dust and grime on the inside of the skylight glass, barely visible but definitely there, was the clear outline of a human handprint. Someone had been trying to get out from inside that building, and this German Shepherd, somehow, some way, had known about it and had been trying to get help. Lisa pulled out her cell phone with shaking fingers. "We're calling the police. Right now?" As she dialed, Jake reached out his small hand toward the German Shepherd. The dog moved carefully across the roof toward him, and when she was close enough, she gently placed her massive head into his palm. Her eyes were liquid brown, intelligent and grateful, but also filled with something that looked like desperate urgency. "What's your name, girl?" Jake whispered. The dog's tail wagged once, softly, as if she was saying, "Thank you for listening. But we're not done yet." The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, but the tapping from inside the building had stopped completely. The German Shepherd lifted her head from Jake's hand and whined again, this time with a note that made the hair on the back of everyone's neck stand up. Time was running out for whoever was trapped below, and they all knew it. The dog had been trying to save someone, and now it was up to them to finish what she'd started. But, as they would soon discover, the person trapped in that building wasn't the only mystery this incredible German Shepherd was carrying. What they found in the next few hours would change not just one life, but the entire understanding of what it meant to be loyal, brave, and willing to risk everything for the people you love. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, but the real story was just beginning to unfold. Officer Rachel Martinez arrived within minutes, her patrol car's red and blue lights casting dancing shadows across the quiet neighborhood. She was a veteran of the Cedar Ridge Police Department, someone who had seen everything from lost cats to serious crimes. But the call about a dog leading people to a possible trapped person was definitely a first. "You folks did the right thing calling this in," Officer Martinez said as she climbed up onto Mike's platform ladder. "Animals have instincts we don't always understand, and if this dog has been trying to get attention..." She trailed off as she looked through the skylight herself, her trained eyes taking in the scene below, the fallen shelving unit, the scattered equipment, and most importantly, that handprint on the glass from the inside. Her expression grew serious immediately. "We need to get this skylight open, now." She radioed for backup and the fire department while Mike retrieved his tools from the garage. The German Shepherd watched every movement with intense focus, as if she understood that help was finally coming. It took 20 minutes to carefully pry open the old skylight without damaging the hinges or letting debris fall into the space below. When the glass panel finally swung open, a rush of stale air emerged, carrying with it the metallic smell Lisa had noticed earlier. But there was something else too, something that made Officer Martinez's face tighten with concern. "Hello?" she called down into the workshop. "Is anyone down there?" Silence. Mike lowered a powerful flashlight into the opening, and the beam revealed more details than they'd been able to see through the dirty glass. The workshop looked like it had been abandoned for months, maybe longer. Dust covered everything, spiderwebs stretched across corners, and the fallen shelving unit was heavy enough that it would have taken at least 2 strong people to move it under normal circumstances. But near the trap door, the flashlight beam caught something that made Jake's eyes widen. A canvas bag, the kind soldiers or hikers might carry, wedged partially under the wooden door. And attached to the bag strap was what looked like a leather harness, sized perfectly for a large dog. The German Shepherd saw it too, because she suddenly became agitated in a way she hadn't been before. She whined and paced to the edge of the skylight opening, looking down with what could only be described as recognition. "That's her stuff down there," Jake said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "That bag belongs to her." Officer Martinez looked at the boy with surprise. "What makes you say that, son? Look at her. She knows exactly what that is. And she's not trying to get down there to explore. She's trying to get down there to get something important." As if to prove Jake's point, the German Shepherd lay down at the edge of the skylight and began to whimper, not with fear, but with what sounded like frustration. She wanted to go down, but she couldn't do it alone, and she seemed to know it. "I'm going down," Officer Martinez decided. "Mike, can you lower me a rope? I want to check that bag and see if we can move that shelving unit safely." The descent into the workshop was easier than expected. The building had been designed with high ceilings, and Officer Martinez was able to lower herself down without too much difficulty. Once on the ground, her flashlight revealed even more details that painted a troubling picture. The workshop hadn't been abandoned gradually. Someone had left quickly, unexpectedly. There were still fresh batteries and a radio sitting on a workbench. A calendar on the wall showed dates marked through the previous month. And most telling of all, there was a dog bowl in the corner with dried remnants of food still in it. "There's definitely been someone living here recently," Officer Martinez called up to the family. "And they had a dog with them." She approached the canvas bag carefully, using her pen to lift the strap and examine it without disturbing potential evidence. What she found made her radio for Detective Sarah Chen immediately. The bag contained items that told a story, piece by piece. A cracked cell phone with a military-style case, a set of keys attached to a small metal raven charm, and wrapped carefully in what looked like medical gauze, a small USB drive. But it was the photograph tucked into a side pocket that changed everything. The picture showed the German Shepherd, younger, and wearing the leather harness that was now attached to the bag. Next to her stood a man in military fatigues, both of them against the backdrop of what looked like a desert landscape. On the back of the photo, someone had written in blue ink, "Tommy plus Nova minus home safe." "Nova?" Jake whispered from above, and the German Shepherd's ears perked up immediately. Her tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster as Jake repeated the name. "Nova, is that you, girl?" The dog's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She let out a soft howl, the kind of sound that spoke of longing and loss and hope all mixed together. Then she lay down and put her head on her paws, looking into the workshop with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Officer Martinez felt her throat tighten. "I think we know who this dog belongs to now. The question is, where is Tommy?" As if the universe was responding to her question, a new sound emerged from the workshop. Not the tapping they'd heard before, but something else. A rhythmic beeping coming from the radio on the workbench. Officer Martinez approached it carefully and discovered that it was receiving some kind of signal, weak but steady. "Detective Chen needs to see this," she said, more to herself than to the family above. "And we need to get Nova down here with her belongings." Getting Nova down into the workshop required creativity and patience. Mike constructed a makeshift ramp using planks and rope, creating a gentle slope that the intelligent dog could navigate safely. The moment Nova's paws touched the workshop floor, her entire demeanor changed. She went straight to the canvas bag, nuzzling it gently, before picking up the leather harness in her mouth and bringing it to Officer Martinez. Then she moved to the radio, sat down next to it, and began to whine in a pattern that matched the beeping sound. "She's trying to tell us something about that signal," Lisa observed from above. "Nova, what is it? What are you trying to say?" The dog looked up at the family, then back at the radio, then toward a corner of the workshop that had been hidden in shadow. She walked to that corner and began pawing at what looked like a loose floorboard. When Officer Martinez pried up the board with her multi-tool, they discovered a small space underneath, containing more items. A military ID card for Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez, a medical discharge form, and a hand-drawn map with locations marked in red ink, including one spot labeled Safe House, with an arrow pointing north toward the industrial district of Cedar Ridge. But the most chilling discovery was a note, written in the same blue ink as the photograph inscription. "If something happens to me, Nova knows the way. Trust her. She'll find me. TR." Detective Chen arrived just as they were processing this new information, her experienced eyes taking in the scene with the kind of focus that came from years of solving puzzles that others couldn't even see. "This is more complex than a missing person case," she said, after examining the evidence. "Tommy Rodriguez is a decorated veteran. According to his file, he was working private security before he disappeared 3 weeks ago. And this..." She held up the USB drive. "This might be why he disappeared." The drive contained encrypted files, but even the file names visible in the directory structure told a story that made Detective Chen's expression grow darker. Financial records, shipping manifests, and what looked like surveillance photos of warehouse buildings in the industrial district. "Nova," Detective Chen said gently, crouching down to the dog's level. "We need to find Tommy. Can you help us?" The German Shepherd's response was immediate. She stood up, walked to the radio, and placed her paw on it. The beeping sound was still coming through, weak but steady. Then she moved to the map, sat down next to it, and looked up at Detective Chen expectantly. "She understands," Jake said from above, his young voice filled with awe. "She knows exactly what you're asking, and she's ready to help." But as Detective Chen was studying the map and planning their next move, a new sound cut through the morning air. A car engine, moving fast down the quiet street outside. Then another. And another. Nova's hackles rose immediately, and she moved to position herself between the humans and the workshop entrance. A low growl began deep in her throat, the kind of warning sound that spoke of real danger approaching. Officer Martinez drew her weapon and moved toward the workshop door, but before she could reach it, a voice called out from outside. "Cedar Ridge Police, this is Detective Walsh. We received reports of suspicious activity at this location." Something about the voice made Detective Chen freeze. Detective Walsh had been transferred to another district months ago, and he definitely shouldn't be here without her knowledge. "Nova, quiet," she whispered, and the dog immediately stopped growling, but remained tense and alert. Something's not right here. Through the workshop's small windows, they could see 3 men approaching the building. They wore what looked like police gear, but something was off about their movements, their positioning. They moved like military personnel, not beat cops responding to a call. The man in front was tall, expensively dressed despite the tactical vest, with the kind of smooth confidence that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted without asking twice. His eyes scanned the building with the focused intensity of someone looking for something specific. "Mr. Colton Reeves," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the morning air. "I'm with Raven Point Security. We're here about the missing dog." Detective Chen's blood ran cold. Raven Point Security was the company listed on several of the files from Tommy's USB drive, and this man wasn't here by coincidence. Nova's reaction was immediate and terrifying. She bared her teeth and pressed herself low to the ground, every muscle in her body coiled for action. This wasn't fear. This was recognition and fury. "That dog belongs to us," Reeves continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "She went missing during a training exercise 3 days ago. We're here to retrieve company property." But Nova wasn't having any of it. She moved to stand directly in front of Jake, who had climbed down into the workshop to be closer to her. Her message was clear. She would protect this boy with her life, and she definitely did not belong to the man outside. Detective Chen's mind raced as pieces began falling into place. Tommy Rodriguez hadn't just disappeared. He'd been investigating something connected to Raven Point Security, and Nova hadn't been pacing on that rooftop because she was lost or confused. She'd been standing guard, waiting, making sure that when help finally came, they would find everything Tommy had hidden away before he disappeared. The question now was, where was Tommy? And why were these men so desperate to get Nova back that they'd show up with fake credentials and military-grade equipment? As if reading her thoughts, Reeves's voice came again, closer now to the workshop door. "Detective Chen, I know you're in there. We've been monitoring police communications. You have something that belongs to us, and we're prepared to take it back by whatever means necessary." Nova looked up at Jake, then at Detective Chen, and something passed between them, an understanding, a decision. The German Shepherd walked calmly to the corner where Tommy's map was hidden, picked it up in her mouth, and brought it to Detective Chen. Then she moved to the radio, placed her paw on it again, and looked toward the workshop door. Her message was crystal clear. She knew where Tommy was, she was ready to lead them there, but first they had to get past the men outside, who definitely didn't have Tommy's best interests at heart. The morning that had started with a boy noticing a dog on a rooftop had become something much more dangerous and complex. But as Nova positioned herself protectively in front of the family that had listened when no one else would, one thing was absolutely certain. This brave, intelligent dog wasn't going anywhere without a fight, and she wasn't going to let anything happen to the people who had finally heard her call for help. The standoff lasted exactly 37 seconds before everything changed. Detective Chen made a split-second decision that would save all their lives. She grabbed the radio from the workbench and quickly tuned it to the emergency frequency, sending out a silent distress signal that would bring real backup. Then she looked at Nova, who seemed to understand exactly what was happening. "Officer Martinez," Detective Chen whispered urgently, "there's a back exit through that storage room. Take the family and Nova and get them out of here. I'll handle Reeves and buy you some time." But Nova had other ideas. The moment she heard footsteps approaching the workshop door, she moved with lightning speed to a section of wall that looked exactly like all the others. She pawed at it once, and a hidden panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage that led toward the neighboring building. "Tommy built an escape route," Jake whispered in amazement. "Nova knows all his secrets." The group moved quickly through the hidden passage, emerging in the basement of an old hardware store 3 buildings away. But as they climbed the stairs to street level, they could hear Reeves and his men breaking into the workshop behind them. "They're going to be angry when they find that place empty," Mike said grimly. Nova seemed to agree because she immediately led them away from the main street, taking a route through back alleys and side paths that only someone who had spent months learning the neighborhood could know. She moved with purpose, checking behind them regularly, but never hesitating about which direction to go. "She's taking us somewhere specific," Lisa observed as they followed the dog through a maze of narrow streets. "This isn't random." They were right. 20 minutes later, Nova led them to an old water tower on the outskirts of the industrial district. The tower had been abandoned for years, its red paint faded and peeling, but the structure was still solid. At its base, someone had cut a section of the chain-link fence just large enough for a person to crawl through. Nova squeezed through the opening and waited for the others to follow. Inside the fenced area, she went directly to a specific spot near the tower's foundation and began digging with her front paws. "What is it, girl?" Jake asked, kneeling down beside her. What Nova uncovered made everyone's breath catch. It was a waterproof container, the kind used by hikers and campers, buried about 6 inches down. Inside were more items from Tommy's investigation: photographs of warehouse buildings, shipping schedules, and a second USB drive wrapped in plastic. But the most important discovery was a small piece of paper with a message written in Tommy's handwriting. "If you're reading this, they found me. Nova will take you to Warehouse 7. Look for the cold storage unit. I'll be there until someone comes. Trust Nova completely. She's smarter than all of us." Tommy, Detective Chen felt her heart sink as the implications hit her. He knew they were coming for him. This was his backup plan. Nova seemed to sense their understanding because she immediately started moving again, this time toward a cluster of industrial buildings visible in the distance. Her pace was faster now, more urgent, as if she knew that time was running out. The warehouse district was a maze of concrete and steel, filled with buildings that all looked identical from the outside. But Nova navigated through it like she'd made this journey dozens of times before. She led them past loading docks and parked trucks, around corners and down service roads, until they reached a building marked with a faded 7 on its side. The warehouse looked abandoned, but Nova's behavior suggested otherwise. She approached a side entrance and pawed at the door, whining softly. When Officer Martinez tried the handle, it turned easily. Too easily. "This feels like a trap," Mike said quietly. Detective Chen nodded. "Reeves and his men could be anywhere, but if Tommy is really in there..." She looked down at Nova, who was staring at the door with intense focus. "We can't just leave him." They entered the warehouse carefully, using flashlights to navigate the dark interior. The space was filled with shipping containers and industrial equipment, creating shadows and hiding places everywhere. But Nova moved through it confidently, leading them toward the back of the building, where a series of cold storage units lined one wall. The units were the kind used for storing perishable goods, each one sealed with heavy metal doors and industrial locks. Nova went directly to the third unit from the left and sat down in front of it, looking back at the group expectantly. Officer Martinez approached the lock with bolt cutters she'd grabbed from the hardware store, but before she could cut through it, they heard voices coming from the front of the warehouse. "Check every unit," Reeves's voice echoed through the space. "They're here somewhere, and I want that dog and those drives." Nova's ears flattened against her head, but she didn't move from her position in front of the storage unit. Whatever was inside, she was determined to protect it. Detective Chen made a quick decision. "Cut the lock! Now!" The bolt cutters snapped through the metal with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the entire warehouse. Officer Martinez pulled the heavy door open, and everyone held their breath. Inside the cold storage unit, wrapped in moving blankets and emergency heat packs, was a man in his 30s with short dark hair and tired eyes. He was conscious but weak, clearly dehydrated and exhausted from days of captivity. "Tommy?" Detective Chen whispered. The man's eyes widened as he saw Nova, and despite his weakened condition, he smiled. "Hey there, girl. I knew you'd bring help." Nova's response was immediate and heartbreaking. She let out a soft whimper and gently placed her head on Tommy's chest, her tail wagging weakly. The reunion was everything Jake had hoped for and more. "How long have you been in here?" Officer Martinez asked, as she and Mike helped Tommy sit up. 3 days, maybe 4. They grabbed me from my apartment and brought me here. Said they wanted to know what I'd found out about their operation. Tommy's voice was hoarse but determined. I didn't tell them anything, but they knew I had backup files hidden somewhere. "The USB drives," Detective Chen said. "Nova led us to them." Tommy looked down at his dog with pride and gratitude. "She's been trained for search and rescue, but she's also the smartest dog I've ever worked with. I taught her our routes, our hiding places, everything. I knew if something happened to me, she'd figure out how to get help." But their reunion was cut short by the sound of footsteps getting closer. Reeves and his men were systematically searching the warehouse, and it was only a matter of time before they reached the storage units. "Can you walk?" Mike asked Tommy, urgently. "I'll have to." Tommy struggled to his feet with help, Nova staying close to support him. "But we need to get out of here fast. Reeves isn't just after the information I gathered. He's willing to kill to protect what they're doing." Detective Chen's radio crackled to life with the sound of sirens in the distance. Her emergency signal had finally brought backup, but it might not arrive in time. "There's another exit at the back of the warehouse. Tommy said quietly. "Nova knows the way." But as they started to move toward the rear of the building, Reeves's voice cut through the darkness, much closer now. "Rodriguez, I know you're in here. Make this easy on yourself and come out. We just want to talk." Tommy's expression hardened. "He's lying. They never intended to let me go." Nova seemed to understand the danger because she suddenly moved to position herself between Tommy and the approaching voices. Her hackles rose and a low growl began deep in her throat. "She won't let them take you again," Jake said with absolute certainty. "She's been waiting to bring you home." The family and the two officers formed a protective circle around Tommy as Nova led them through the maze of shipping containers toward the back exit. But they could hear Reeves and his men getting closer, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "There!" one of the men shouted. "Movement near the south wall." The chase was on. Nova broke into a run, and despite his weakened condition, Tommy kept pace with her. The group moved as fast as they could through the warehouse, but they could hear their pursuers gaining ground. They reached the back exit just as the first shots rang out. Not aimed to kill, but close enough to send a clear message. Reeves wasn't planning to let them leave with the evidence that could destroy his operation. "Stay low and keep moving," Officer Martinez ordered as they burst through the exit into the morning sunlight. Outside, Nova immediately led them toward a series of drainage ditches that ran along the warehouse district. The concrete channels were deep enough to provide cover, and Nova seemed to know exactly where they led. As they ran through the ditches, following Nova's lead, Tommy explained what he'd discovered about Raven Point Security. "They're not just a private security company," he said breathlessly. "They're running illegal arms deals through those warehouses. Military-grade weapons being sold to anyone willing to pay, no questions asked. I was gathering evidence when they caught me." "The files on the USB drives?" Detective Chen asked. "Everything, financial records, shipping manifests, communications with buyers, enough to shut them down permanently." Tommy looked down at Nova, who was leading them with unwavering determination. "That's why they wanted her so badly. They thought I might have trained her to retrieve the evidence if something happened to me." "Did you?" Jake asked. Tommy smiled despite their dangerous situation. "Actually, yes, but I never thought she'd be smart enough to recruit a whole family to help her do it." The sound of sirens was getting louder now, and they could see police cars arriving at the warehouse district from multiple directions. Detective Chen's backup had finally arrived in force, but Reeves and his men weren't giving up easily. They emerged from the warehouse and spread out to search the area systematically. It was clear they had no intention of being taken alive. Nova led the group through the drainage system until they reached a point where the concrete channels passed under a main road. Here, she stopped and looked back at Tommy, as if asking for instructions. "The police station is 6 blocks north," Tommy said. "If we can get there—" But before he could finish the sentence, they heard the sound of footsteps above them on the road. Reeves had figured out where they were hiding. "Rodriguez!" His voice called down into the drainage ditch. "You can run, but you can't hide forever. And when we catch you, that dog of yours is going to disappear permanently." The threat against Nova was the last straw for everyone in the group. Jake stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "Nova saved your life," he called up to Reeves. "She's a hero, and heroes don't belong to bad guys like you." Tommy put a protective hand on Jake's shoulder, but he was smiling. "Kid's got a point. Nova, show them what real loyalty looks like." The German Shepherd looked up at the road where Reeves was standing, then back at her family of rescuers. Her tail wagged once, and then she did something none of them expected. She started howling. Not the sad, lonely howl of a lost dog, but the strong, clear call of a dog announcing that the cavalry had arrived. The sound echoed through the drainage system and out across the warehouse district, and within seconds, it was answered by the howls and barks of every police dog in the backup units that had just arrived. Reeves realized too late that he was surrounded. As police officers closed in from all directions, he made one last desperate attempt to escape, but Nova wasn't done with her surprises yet. The clever dog had led them to this exact spot for a reason. The drainage ditch connected to a storm drain system that emerged directly behind the police station. As Reeves and his men were being arrested above ground, Nova was leading her family to safety through the tunnels she and Tommy had mapped out months earlier. When they emerged into the sunlight behind the police station, Tommy dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Nova's neck. "You did it, girl. You brought them all home safe." Nova's tail wagged as she looked around at the family that had listened when she needed help most. Jake knelt down beside them and gently petted her ears. "You're the bravest dog in the world," he whispered. But Nova seemed to know that her work wasn't quite finished yet. She looked back toward the warehouse district, then up at Tommy, as if to ask, "What happens now?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. As Tommy was being checked by paramedics in the police station parking lot, Agent Karen Parker from the FBI's K-9 unit arrived with a team of federal investigators. The evidence on Tommy's USB drives had triggered a multi-state investigation into Raven Point Security's illegal weapons trafficking operation. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Agent Parker said, approaching with the respect due to a fellow veteran, "what you uncovered has helped us connect dots we've been trying to piece together for months. Raven Point has been using their security contracts as cover for moving military-grade weapons to criminal organizations across 3 states. Tommy nodded weakly from his position on the ambulance stretcher. "I suspected it was bigger than just our local operation. The shipping manifests showed destinations I'd never heard of, and the money flow was too large for legitimate security work." Agent Parker looked down at Nova, who had positioned herself protectively beside Tommy's stretcher. "And this is the dog who led the rescue operation?" "Nova's not just any dog," Tommy said with pride. "She's trained in search and rescue, but more than that, she understands people and situations in ways that most humans don't. She knew I was in trouble before I did." Jake, who had been quietly listening to the adult conversation, stepped forward. "She was trying to tell us for hours before we finally listened. She knew exactly where to look and exactly how to get help." Agent Parker knelt down to Nova's level, extending her hand slowly. Nova sniffed carefully, then allowed the agent to pet her head. "I've worked with dozens of K-9 units over the years, but I've never seen a dog demonstrate this level of independent problem-solving and strategic thinking." But their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Walsh, the real Detective Walsh this time, accompanied by 2 other officers who looked confused and concerned. "Detective Chen," Walsh said urgently, "we need to talk. Colton Reeves isn't who we thought he was." The group moved into a conference room at the police station, where Detective Walsh spread out a series of documents and photographs on the table. What they revealed was more shocking than anyone had anticipated. "Colton Reeves is actually Colonel Marcus Steele, discharged from the military 3 years ago under suspicious circumstances," Walsh explained. "He's been using false identities to build a network of corrupt security companies across the region." Agent Parker examined the documents with growing concern. "This goes beyond weapons trafficking. They've been recruiting former military personnel and using their security contracts to gather intelligence on potential targets for larger criminal operations." Tommy struggled to sit up straighter, his face pale but determined. That explains why they were so desperate to get Nova back. She didn't just find evidence of their current operation, she found evidence of their entire network. "What do you mean?" Detective Chen asked. Tommy looked down at Nova, who seemed to sense the importance of the conversation. "I trained Nova to recognize specific scents and sounds associated with different types of weapons and explosives. When we were investigating the warehouses, she kept alerting to things that shouldn't have been there. Military-grade equipment that no legitimate security company should have access to." Agent Parker's expression grew grave. "If Nova can identify the specific weapon signatures, she could help us locate other storage sites and safe houses throughout their network." But Nova's response to this suggestion was unexpected. Instead of showing excitement or readiness to work, she moved closer to Tommy and placed her head on his lap, looking up at him with what could only be described as concern. "She's worried about me," Tommy said softly, understanding his dog's message immediately. "She knows I'm not strong enough for field work yet, and she doesn't want to leave me." Jake moved closer to the pair, his young face serious with thought. "What if Nova could do the work, but still stay close to Tommy? What if we could find a way for her to help catch the bad guys without going away?" Agent Parker considered this carefully. "There might be a way. We could set up a temporary command center here in Cedar Ridge and have Nova work with our team from a central location. That way she could use her skills to help the investigation while staying close to Tommy during his recovery." The plan that emerged over the next hour was unlike anything the FBI had ever attempted. Nova would work with Agent Parker's team to identify weapon signatures from evidence collected at various sites throughout the Raven Point network. Her unique ability to recognize specific scents and sounds could help investigators connect locations and identify hidden storage areas that traditional methods might miss. But there was a problem. Steele and his remaining associates were still at large, and they knew that Nova was the key to unraveling their entire operation. As long as she was helping the investigation, she would be a target. "We'll need to provide protection for Nova and anyone associated with her," Agent Parker said. "That includes Tommy, and unfortunately, it includes your family as well," she added, looking at Lisa, Mike, and Jake. Mike's expression grew serious. "What kind of protection are we talking about?" "Safe house, probably for a few weeks while we round up the rest of Steele's network. It's not ideal, but Nova has become a critical witness in a federal investigation." But Nova had a different idea. She stood up from beside Tommy and walked over to Jake, sitting down in front of him and looking directly into his eyes. Then she walked to the window that faced the direction of their neighborhood and whined softly. "She wants to go home," Jake said with certainty. "She doesn't want to hide in a safe house. She wants to go back to the place where people listen to her." Tommy watched this exchange with growing understanding. Nova's right. Hiding won't solve anything, and Steele will just wait us out. But if we go back to the neighborhood, back to the routine, Nova can work from there, and we can draw Steele out on our terms. Agent Parker looked skeptical. "That's extremely dangerous. Steele is desperate now, and desperate people make unpredictable choices." But Detective Chen had an idea. "What if we turn the neighborhood into a controlled environment? Set up surveillance, position undercover agents, use Nova's home territory as an advantage rather than a vulnerability." The plan they developed was risky but brilliant. The family would return home, but the house and surrounding area would be monitored by a team of federal agents. Nova would work with Agent Parker during the day, using her scent detection abilities to analyze evidence from the Raven Point investigation. And in the evenings, she would maintain her normal routine with Tommy and her new extended family. Most importantly, they would use Nova's intelligence and local knowledge to anticipate where Steele might try to strike. The first test of this strategy came sooner than expected. 2 days after returning home, Nova woke Jake early in the morning with gentle pawing and soft whining. But this wasn't the urgent distress signal she'd used to alert them to Tommy's disappearance. This was something different, a quiet, focused alertness that suggested she'd detected something important, but not immediately dangerous. Jake followed Nova to his bedroom window, and she pressed her nose against the glass, looking toward the old workshop where everything had started. At first, Jake couldn't see anything unusual, but Nova's behavior was so specific and purposeful that he called for his parents and Tommy, who had been staying in their guest room during his recovery. When the adults joined them at the window, Agent Parker's voice came through the surveillance radio. "We see it too. Single individual, moving carefully through the alley behind the workshop. Could be reconnaissance." Tommy watched Nova's body language carefully. "She's not afraid," he observed. "She's hunting." It was true. Nova's posture was that of a working dog who had detected something important and was ready to act on it. Her tail was up, but not wagging. Her ears were forward and alert, and her entire body was coiled with focused energy. "What do you see, girl?" Tommy asked quietly. Nova looked at him, then back toward the workshop, then deliberately walked to the corner of Jake's room, where she'd left her leather working harness. She picked it up and brought it to Tommy, dropping it at his feet. "She wants to work," Jake said. "She wants to catch the bad guy." Agent Parker's voice came through the radio again. "Subject is moving toward the front of the workshop. Looks like he's trying to access the building." Tommy made a decision that would have seemed crazy to anyone who didn't know Nova's capabilities. "Agent Parker, Nova wants to track him. She can move through the neighborhood without being detected, and she knows terrain that your agents don't." "Absolutely not," came the immediate response. "We're not putting a civilian dog at risk." But Nova had already made her own decision. She moved to the back door and sat down, looking back at Tommy with an expression that clearly said, "Are you coming or not?" Tommy looked at his dog, then at the family who had saved both their lives, then at the radio. "Agent Parker, Nova isn't a civilian dog. She's a trained military working dog, and this is what she does. Trust her." What followed was unlike any police operation anyone had ever seen. Nova led Tommy and Agent Parker through the neighborhood, using routes that avoided all the main streets and surveillance points. She moved with silent efficiency, checking around corners and signaling when it was safe to advance. Her knowledge of every alley, fence line, and hidden passage gave them advantages that no amount of training could replicate. They tracked the intruder to an abandoned house 3 blocks away, where Nova's behavior indicated that he wasn't alone. Her silent signals told Tommy that there were at least 3 people inside, and her body language suggested they were armed. But instead of alerting the subjects to their presence, Nova did something extraordinary. She led Tommy and Agent Parker to a position where they could observe the house safely, then deliberately moved to a spot where one of the subjects could see her through a window. The reaction was immediate. The men inside began arguing in voices loud enough to be picked up by Agent Parker's recording equipment. They thought Nova was alone, searching for Tommy, and they debated whether to capture her or eliminate her as a threat. What they didn't realize was that Nova had led them into a trap. While they were focused on her, FBI agents were moving into position around the house, guided by the intelligence Nova had provided about the number and location of the subjects inside. The arrest operation was swift and decisive. 3 of Steele's remaining associates were taken into custody, along with evidence that led to the discovery of 2 more weapon storage sites and a safe house containing financial records for the entire Raven Point network. But the most important discovery came from Nova herself. As the FBI team was processing the crime scene, she led them to a buried cache in the abandoned house's backyard. Inside were detailed plans for attacks on federal facilities and a list of law enforcement personnel who had been targeted for elimination. Tommy's name was at the top of the list. So was Agent Parker's, and so was Jake's entire family. They weren't just trying to cover up their weapons trafficking, Agent Parker said grimly as she reviewed the documents. They were planning to eliminate everyone who could testify against them. Tommy knelt down beside Nova and wrapped his arms around her neck. "You saved us all, girl." Again. But Nova's work still wasn't finished. She looked toward the direction of downtown Cedar Ridge and whined softly, the same focused sound she'd made when leading them to find Tommy. "There's more," Tommy said, understanding his dog's message. "She knows where Steele is hiding." The final confrontation would come at dawn the next day, in a place none of them expected, led by a German shepherd who had turned a simple morning rescue into the unraveling of a criminal network that stretched across multiple states. As they prepared for what they hoped would be the last operation, Jake looked up at Nova with the admiration that only a child could feel for a true hero. "You're not just the bravest dog in the world," he said quietly. "You're the smartest too." Nova's tail wagged once, softly, as if to say, "Just wait. You haven't seen anything yet." The next morning arrived with a heavy fog that blanketed Cedar Ridge like a gray curtain. Nova woke Tommy before dawn, not with her usual gentle pawing, but with an urgency that immediately put everyone on high alert. She moved restlessly through the house, checking windows, returning to Tommy's side, then moving to the front door where she sat with the rigid posture of a soldier awaiting orders. "She knows something," Tommy said quietly as the family gathered in the living room. "Nova has a different energy today. This isn't reconnaissance or tracking. This is endgame." Agent Parker arrived within minutes of Tommy's call, bringing with her a team of 6 federal agents and equipment that transformed the family's modest living room into a tactical command center. But even with all the advanced technology and trained personnel, everyone's attention kept returning to Nova, whose behavior suggested she was operating on a level of information that human intelligence couldn't access. "Talk to me, Nova," Tommy said, kneeling down to meet her eyes directly. "What do you know?" Nova's response was immediate and complex. She walked to the window, facing downtown Cedar Ridge, and placed her front paws on the sill, looking toward the city center. Then she moved to Jake's backpack, which was sitting by the door, and gently picked up a small toy car, a red emergency vehicle that Jake had been playing with the day before. "Emergency services," Agent Parker said, understanding immediately. "She's telling us that Steele is targeting emergency services infrastructure." But Nova wasn't finished with her message. She carried the toy car to the kitchen table where Agent Parker had spread out maps of the city, and she placed it directly on the location of Cedar Ridge General Hospital, the same hospital where Tommy's mother Lisa worked. The implication hit everyone at the same time. Steele wasn't just planning another weapons deal or trying to eliminate witnesses. He was planning something that would cause maximum chaos and casualties, something that would overwhelm the emergency response system and create the kind of confusion he needed to escape permanently. The hospital is the largest emergency facility in the region, Lisa said, her voice tight with professional concern. If something happened there during morning shift change, when the building is most crowded, Agent Parker was already on her radio, coordinating with hospital security and local emergency services. But Nova's agitation was increasing, and she kept moving between the map and the window, as if time was running out faster than they realized. Tommy studied his dog's behavior with a focused attention that had kept both of them alive through multiple combat deployments. She's not just telling us where, Nova, she's telling us when, and it's soon. The decision to move immediately was made not by the FBI leadership or local police command, but by Nova herself. She walked to her working harness, picked it up, and brought it to Tommy. Then she moved to the front door and waited, her entire body radiating the kind of focused determination that comes from knowing exactly what needs to be done. "Agent Parker," Tommy said, "Nova's ready to work, and she's telling us we don't have time for traditional protocols. We need to trust her completely." The convoy that left Cedar Ridge at dawn was unlike any law enforcement operation in the city's history. Nova rode in the lead vehicle with Tommy and Agent Parker, her head out the window as she tracked scents and sounds that guided their route through the fog-shrouded streets. Behind them followed unmarked cars carrying FBI agents, local police, and hospital security personnel. But Nova didn't lead them to the hospital itself. Instead, she directed them to a construction site 6 blocks away, where a new medical center was being built. The site had been abandoned for weeks due to permit issues, creating a perfect staging area for someone planning an attack on the nearby hospital. As they approached the construction site, Nova's behavior became increasingly specific. She indicated the direction they should approach from, the locations where they should position themselves, and most importantly, the exact building where Steele and his remaining team were preparing their final operation. What they found in the half-completed medical center was chilling. Steele had converted the building into a sophisticated operations center, complete with surveillance equipment monitoring the hospital, detailed floor plans showing emergency exits and security positions, and enough explosives to level several city blocks. But most disturbing of all were the timing charts that showed Steele's plan was designed to coincide with the morning shift change at the hospital, the exact time when Tommy's recovery checkup was scheduled, and when Jake's class was supposed to visit the children's wing as part of a school field trip. He's not just trying to escape, Agent Parker realized with horror. He's planning to eliminate everyone connected to Nova's rescue operation, along with hundreds of innocent people. Tommy felt his blood run cold as the scope of Steele's revenge became clear. This wasn't about covering up a weapons trafficking operation anymore. This was personal vendetta, taken to the level of domestic terrorism. Nova seemed to understand the magnitude of what they were facing because her behavior shifted into something Tommy had only seen once before. During their most dangerous mission overseas, she became completely calm, completely focused, and completely fearless. "She's going into combat mode," Tommy explained to Agent Parker. "Nova knows this isn't just about finding bad guys anymore. This is about stopping them." The tactical approach Nova guided them to was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to storm the building and risk triggering the explosives, she led them to a service tunnel that connected the construction site to the hospital's utility system. The tunnel would allow them to approach Steele's position without being detected, while also giving them a way to evacuate civilians if the operation went wrong. But as they prepared to enter the tunnel, Nova did something that surprised everyone. She walked back to the vehicle where Jake and his parents were waiting under protection, and she looked directly at the boy who had first listened to her call for help. Jake seemed to understand what Nova was trying to tell him because he reached out and gently touched her head. "I know you have to go help Tommy stop the bad guys," he said quietly, "but you have to promise to come back safe, okay?" Nova's tail wagged once, and she touched her nose to Jake's hand in what looked like a solemn promise. Then she returned to Tommy's side, ready for whatever came next. The journey through the service tunnel was tense and silent, with Nova leading the way through passages that twisted beneath the city. Her ability to navigate in complete darkness, using scent and sound to guide them, was something that no amount of human training could replicate. When they emerged in the basement of the construction site, Nova's signals indicated that Steele and two associates were on the third floor, directly above a cache of explosives that could bring down the entire building. The timing device they could hear ticking through the floor showed less than 30 minutes before detonation. "We need to split up," Agent Parker decided. "Half the team secures the explosives, half goes after Steele. Nova, which group do you want to be with?" Nova's answer was immediate. She moved to position herself between the stairs leading to Steele's location and the basement area containing the explosives. Her message was clear. She was going to be with both groups, moving between them as needed to coordinate the operation. What followed was the most complex tactical operation Nova had ever been part of. She guided Agent Parker's team to the explosives cache, where her scent detection abilities helped them identify which devices were active and which were decoys. Then she led Tommy and two other agents up the stairs toward Steele's position, using her knowledge of the building's layout to avoid detection. But Steele was ready for them. As they reached the third floor, automated security systems activated, filling the corridors with blinding lights and deafening alarms. In the chaos, Steele and his associates tried to escape using a predetermined route to the building's roof, where a helicopter was waiting. Nova anticipated this move. Instead of following them up the stairs, she led Tommy to a service elevator that would take them directly to the roof level, cutting off Steele's escape route. The confrontation on the roof was brief but intense. Steele, realizing he was trapped, made a desperate attempt to trigger the explosives manually using a remote detonator. But Nova was faster. She launched herself across the roof, not to attack Steele, but to knock the detonator from his hands before he could complete the sequence. The device skittered across the roof surface and over the edge, falling harmlessly to the ground below, where Agent Parker's team was able to secure it. "It's over, Steele," Tommy said, his weapon trained on the man who had tried to destroy everything Nova had worked to protect. "Your network is finished, your associates are in custody, and the only thing you've accomplished is proving that a dog is smarter than you'll ever be." Steele's arrest was anticlimactic after everything they'd been through. As federal agents led him away, he looked back at Nova with something that might have been respect mixed with bewilderment. "How?" he asked. "How did a dog outmaneuver a team of trained operatives?" Tommy smiled as he knelt down to embrace Nova. "Because she wasn't fighting for money or power or revenge. She was fighting for family." The aftermath of the operation brought changes that none of them had expected. The FBI offered Tommy a position as a K9 trainer, recognizing that his partnership with Nova represented a new level of human-animal tactical cooperation. But Tommy's response surprised everyone. "Nova and I make a good team," he said, "but she's proven that she works best when she's part of a larger family, and I think we've found that family." The arrangement they worked out was unlike anything in law enforcement history. Tommy and Nova would continue working with federal agencies on complex cases, but they would be based in Cedar Ridge, living with Jake's family and maintaining the relationships that had made Nova's incredible achievements possible. Jake's role in this new arrangement was officially described as Civilian K9 Liaison, but everyone who saw him with Nova knew it was much more than that. The boy had a gift for understanding what Nova was trying to communicate, and Nova had an equally special ability to translate her professional insights into terms that Jake could interpret for the adults. 6 months after the morning, when Jake first saw Nova pacing on the workshop roof, the three of them could be found there every evening at sunset. Tommy had repaired the roof and made it safe for visitors, turning it into a kind of observation deck where Nova could survey her neighborhood and Jake could practice the communication skills that were making him the youngest K9 consultant in FBI history. "Do you think she knew?" Jake asked one evening as they watched Nova pace along the roof's edge with obvious contentment. "When she was up here alone that first morning, do you think she knew we would all end up being family?" Tommy considered this question seriously. "I think Nova understood something that took the rest of us a lot longer to figure out. She knew that the best way to save someone isn't to do it alone. The best way is to find people who are willing to listen and then trust them to help you do what needs to be done." Nova paused in her pacing and looked down at them, her intelligent brown eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. She didn't need to ask for help anymore, because she knew that help would always be there. But more importantly, she had learned that being part of a family meant that sometimes you were the one who needed rescuing, and sometimes you were the one who did the rescuing. And either way, you never had to do it alone. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Cedar Ridge, Nova settled down between Tommy and Jake on the rooftop where everything had started. Tomorrow, there might be new cases to solve, new people to help, new adventures that would require all of her intelligence and courage. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, home, safe, and surrounded by the family who had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with someone who is willing to stop and listen when a hero is trying to ask for help. The workshop roof had become a symbol of something beautiful, that connection between hearts that transcends species, that willingness to trust and be trusted, and that understanding that real strength comes not from fighting alone, but from knowing when to call for backup and where to find it. Nova's story had started with a desperate plea for help, but it had become something much more powerful. A testament to the fact that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust a stranger to care about something that matters to you. And in Cedar Ridge, on a rooftop where a German Shepherd had once paced in desperate hope, that lesson was being lived out every single day. If this incredible story of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes are all around us. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us about a time when an animal showed you what true loyalty really means. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing true stories that will restore your faith in the power of connection and courage. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most important voices are the ones that don't use words at all.